Hello and welcome to the Most Maligned Horror Podcast. This is a show offering critical analysis and contextualization of the horror films of the 2000s. My name is Macaulay Elijah Quinn. I am a filmmaker and film critic, and on today's episode we're going to be covering the second film in the Ju-On franchise, that is Ju-On the Curse Part 2. Right off the bat, I want to say that Ju-On the Curse Part 2 is not nearly as effective a film as the first, which is to say, I was able to finish this film in one sitting, which long-time listeners of the show will remember I was not able to do with the first film. That film I found far too intense, far too frightening. And so what I ended up doing was I broke it up into sort of individual segments, and I watched each of those over the course of several days. Which, I want to clarify something. I was listening back to that original episode today, and I said some absolutely fucking mad shit on there. I was talking about how one of the great things about an anthology film is that you can watch each of the individual segments and you won't miss anything. And I want to say, I want to clarify, that's just absolutely wrong. I was just completely talking out my ass when I said that. Assuming that it is made intentionally, assuming that it's not an anthology film that's just sort of like created after the fact, it's not just like a collation of a bunch of short films just, you know, cobbled together and sold as one product. Assuming that the filmmakers set out with the specific intention of creating an anthology film, they had, you know, some sort of through line, some sort of like visual connection or story connection or sort of something thematic that they were trying to achieve with the different like shorts. Assuming that it was made like that, if you were to break it apart and watch each individual segment as though they were their own short film, you are going to be missing something there. You are going to be the cumulative effect of watching all of the films together is sort of what an anthology film is all about. And so the way that I watched Ju-On the Curse was not optimal, let's say. It was not how the filmmakers would have intended you to watch the film. And unfortunately, it was something that I had to do because I found the film so frightening, so intense. I couldn't sit there for longer than sort of the 10 or so minutes that each segment takes. And this is sort of what I mean by Part 2 is not nearly as effective as Part 1. Part 1 feels genuinely evil. It feels like a film that was made to hurt you. By contrast, Part 2 feels a lot more familiar. I'm not the first one to sort of identify that a more apt title for this film would likely be Ju-On the Curse 1.5. A full half hour of this 87-minute movie is a repeat of footage that we had already seen in Part 1. And so sort of as a result of that, you don't have your guard up quite so much. You're not... I personally, I didn't feel as though I was backed into a corner the way that the first film sort of made me feel. I didn't have my heckles up. I was a lot less guarded. And so as a result, I was a lot more comfortable, and I was able to sit there and I was able to watch both of the opening segments, which in the first film just made me absolutely lose my mind. Like I was just trying desperately to sort of get away from the screen when I was watching it originally. This time around, I was able to sort of ease in a little bit more, which is not to say that this is like a cookie cutter sequel or anything like that. It really isn't. In a lot of ways, the filmmakers are taking like some really big swings, particularly in the film's third act. It gets quite abstract, quite sort of bizarre. The filmmakers this time around, they seem a lot more sure of themselves. They seem a lot more confident in the work that they're doing and the story that they're telling. And so they're sort of considerably more playful, like particularly with the use of like special effects. In the first film, special effects were used, I think, very sporadically. I don't actually remember. There was like a gore effect in one of the, well, in multiple of the films there was like gore effects, but there was one really prominent one, the young woman with her like whole jaw removed. But outside of that, there weren't like a lot of other in camera effects or CGI or anything like that. This time around, they are using a lot of that stuff, and it does create a really uncanny, really unreal atmosphere, which was really appealing to me as somebody who likes that stuff. Watching the film, I was reminded a lot of the director Koji Shirashi, who is a filmmaker most known for his work in the found footage genre. He would be most known in the West for his film Nori the Curse, which is a really phenomenal found footage documentary film that I cannot wait to cover on this show. I think I've shouted it out a couple of times now. If not that, then it would be Grotesque, which was one of the like sort of it was riding that wave of like torture porn films, and it was specifically made to be banned in Western countries, and he succeeded in that. It's a really quite graphic film. Shirashi's work rejects realism in sort of a really profound way. He uses a lot of like really sort of like quick and dirty special effects that do look very strange. The effect of them is what I find so compelling, because even as you're looking at them on screen and you can tell that they're, this is like a pretty simple computer model or like an overlay or something like that, it still has the effect of unsettling you, of putting you in sort of a unique headspace. The end of his film, Occult, is sort of infamous for being, well, some people call it really bad. The real heads know that it is the greatest ending to a film ever made. It is a vision of hell that is so abstracted, so sort of outside of human comprehension, that it becomes very distressing. And I saw a lot of that here. I saw a lot of that in Ju-on the Curse too. These filmmakers aren't going nearly as hard, obviously. They're not creating these like abstracted visions of hell. They're not creating like amorphous, digitally stretched nightmare creatures. But their intention is sort of the same, to unsettle, to put the viewer on edge. And they do achieve this. There's one segment in particular where the effects work is put on display. They are doing, it's a pretty quick and dirty in-camera effect. They're just duplicating Kyako over and over again in sort of like one shot. But it does have this uncanny sort of strangeness to it. Like when you see this like wall of people, this wall of this one woman just crashing against this building, it does have the effect of like, holy shit, this is crazy to look at. I know from research that I've done that Koji Shirashi is pretty directly inspired by this film, by just sort of the Ju-on franchise, by the Ring franchise. One of his sort of earliest films is called something similar to The Grudge. Let me see if I can find this. Here it is, one of his first V Cinema films, Japan's A Map of Grudges Investigation. So he's pretty clearly inspired by this film, and I would not be surprised to hear that he sort of like was introduced to some of the effects work that he would go on to sort of like refine and sort of perfect by watching films like Jewel the Curse. So I found that really rewarding, like seeing a work that like so directly inspired one of my favorite directors. That was great. And I should say this film is pretty excellent. Like I did have a really good time watching it. I didn't feel as distressed as when I had watched the first film. I keep repeating this. Part 2 does not have the intentionality of part 1. It is not a film that is like trying to really upset you. This feels like a film that is trying to establish a franchise. This feels like a film that is trying to be sort of noticed and be picked up as a cinematic series. One thing that's kind of important to remember about these films is that they were being made by students. Like, these are essentially two student films that you're watching. And so I don't think that it's a leap to say that they were made with the intention of being noticed by not Hollywood, but sort of whatever the Japanese equivalent of that is. You know, the sort of capital F filmmakers, the ones that, you know, do this for a living. The people shooting on RE cameras instead of, you know, a Panasonic camcorder or whatever else. And I just think that that is worth noticing. I think that's worth recognizing, because a lot of the sort of experimentation that's being done in this film, it doesn't all cohere. It doesn't sort of create, you know, a totally cohesive work. But it would, I think, impress prospective like producers and, you know, people who would give you money to then go on and make whatever your next project is. Like I said, this time around, the filmmakers feel a lot more sure of themselves. They feel a lot more confident to sort of throw abstract imagery at you, you know, bizarre imagery at you. And part of me does feel that this is because they wanted to show sort of a different side of themselves. They wanted to show an ability to direct a different kind of film. Not to put too fine a point on it, but that really is it. Part 2 is a very different film from part 1. And even though the first half hour is a replay of part 1, it feels very different. Cumulatively, watching this film from beginning to end, it feels very different than the first film. And that isn't a bad thing, it's just your mileage may vary. For me, I feel that I enjoyed myself a lot more watching part 2 than part 1. You know, I didn't feel at any point like I was going to die. I didn't have nightmares as a result of watching it. But I do feel as though I'm not going to remember this film in as much detail as I remember the first. I'm only sort of thinking of this now, but there's this phenomena that is, you know, it's been commented on in a few different places of people viewing a work of art that has been massively influential, that has gone on to inspire a bunch of copycats, and they see the film that sort of inspired all of those, and they're unable to separate it from the work that came after. They're unable to sort of like see it on its own anymore. And I worry that that is maybe the case here for me in Jewel and the Curse Part 2, because like I said, I see a lot of the directors that I like in this film, and I see where they've taken inspiration from. But because they have done such like incredible work with it because they have taken that inspiration and they have done works that I find to be just like really moving, really compelling. It's hard for me to sort of like distance myself from that. When I'm watching films, when I'm critiquing films, I always do my best to sort of meet a film halfway. I try to meet a film where it's at. And sometimes that's harder than others. You know, sometimes it's really hard to look past my own sort of personal biases, my own history with cinema. I can imagine that at the time of the film's release, if I had have watched this, it would have absolutely changed my brain chemistry. It would have changed the way that I think about films and think about the use of special effects in films to create mood, create atmosphere. But because it is the year 2024, because I have seen all of the films that came after this that were inspired by it, and I have seen the ways that they have sort of like taken that to an extreme, it's very hard to now go back to the original work and to feel that same sort of passion and that same excitement. As well, coming off of the back of The Curse Part 1, which is like such a phenomenal work of art. You know, I find myself thinking about that film all the time. That film still excites me. That film makes me think about horror films, about sort of their potential, about the experiences that people can have watching horror. And this film it doesn't grab me in the same way. It doesn't push those buttons. And ultimately, I don't think that it's trying to. Ultimately, I think that it is striving for a different feeling. And it's just not one that hit me at the right time. And I get that that's like a little bit wishy-washy. I get that the cool thing to do would be to like have a take and to like really, come out swing and be like, oh, this film's fucking terrible, or like, oh, this film's amazing. It's like underseen gem or whatever. But that just isn't the case. It's really just not how I experienced the film. Like I said, your mileage may vary. I imagine that for some people, this would be just like a work of genius, but eh. What I will say is that I am very excited to see what comes next. I know that the next film in the Ju-On franchise is Ju-On the Grudge and was a theatrical release. Both of these first two films were V Cinema films. They were released direct to video. And The Grudge was put out in theaters. And so I'm very interested to see which version of The Curse are we going to see in that film. Because as I understand it, that is a remake, that is a retelling of this same story. And I'm very curious to see if we get a blend of The Curse Part 1, the, creeping dread, the really, like, intense atmosphere, alongside this more sort of, like, playful, abstract, bizarre Part 2. I'm really curious to see if the director can sort of successfully merge those two sort of aesthetics, those two feelings, and create like a single work. But I'm not going to know for a while yet. Ju-On the Grudge wasn't released in theaters until 2002, by the looks of things. I am just scrolling through IMDb as we speak. So it had its festival premiere in 2002. It wasn't released widely until 2003. So it's going to be a long time. It's going to be a few seasons before we cover that film, but I am really excited to get to it. And I hope that you are too. I hope that you'll stick with me on this long journey that I still have ahead of me. We are sort of, I think, just past the halfway point of this first season. I thank you all so much for sticking with me this long. If you've been here since the beginning, thank you so much. If you've just recently joined, thank you as well. I appreciate everybody who listens. It's incredible to me that anybody does. What I would ask is that you please give the show a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice, particularly if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's really important over there. But until next time, I want to thank Janka Glonis for the use of her track Slime dripping down the walls off of the album Funtime Party Gal. A link to that album and to their Bandcamp can be found in the episode description. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do that on Twitter at Most Maligned. You can also send long-form questions or comments to mostmaligned@gmail.com. It will be 2 weeks until the next show, on which we're going to be talking about Bless the Child from the year 2000, which, based solely on the poster, I'm yet to watch the film, looks like maybe an Omen knockoff, or perhaps even like a Sixth Sense knockoff. I'm getting sort of Sixth Sense vibes from it. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Until then, though, this has been the Most Maligned Horror Podcast.